In one of these analog horror worlds, you got an 85% chance of walking out alive. In another, it's 4%. 4%? And I bet money you can't guess which is which, because this isn't a list of the scariest analog horror worlds. No, it's a survival ranking. 10 worlds, the Walten Files, Local 58, Gemini, Home, Entertainment, all ranked by asking one question. Could you actually survive in it? Not as a protagonist, not as a researcher who already knows all the rules. I'm talking about you right now, with the habits you have and the calls you actually make when it goes wrong. By the bottom of this list, you're going to find the one world that almost nobody could survive. And the reason why is going to change the way how you think about every world above it. All right, we're going to go from most survivable to least survivable. The Walten Files is an analog horror web series created by Chilean animator Martin Walls, and on the surface it looks like one of the most disturbing worlds on this list. Haunting animatronics, a missing father, children buried in a forest. The story centers on the failed 1970 restaurant chain called Bob's Burgers. In 1974, restaurant co-founder Felix Kranken drove the children of his business partner Jack Walten from a party while intoxicated. He crashed a car and all the children died, and out of fear and guilt, he buried them in a local forest. Jack Walten disappeared shortly after. The parent company, Bunny Smiles Incorporated, shut down, and the truth was sealed inside of VHS tapes, employee orientation videos, and the animatronics themselves, which are now haunted by the souls of everyone the company destroyed. Years later, Jack's daughter Sophie begins investigating, and the deeper she goes, the more she starts to realize the dark truth of what happened to her family as she slowly uncovers the mystery. So the question is, could you actually survive in this world? If you do everything right, you have an 85% chance of survival. The Walten Files is not trying to kill you. It is trying to resolve something that happened to one specific family in one specific place in the 1970s. The haunting animatronic Bond and all the other animatronics, all of it is centered entirely around Bond's Burgers locations and Bunny Smiles Incorporated properties. The ghost of Bond is not patrolling your neighborhood. It's not haunting random civilians across the country. It is not a cosmic force with an agenda against humanity. It's just grief in physical form with a specific address in a specific territory. So hey, if you have no connection to Bunny Smiles Incorporated, no connection to the Walten family, and you never set foot inside of an abandoned Bob's Burgers location, which I don't know why anyone would, this world's horror will never even touch you. And if someone hands you an orientation tape for a ceremony that no longer exists, don't press play. Now, the Walten Files is the most dangerous survivable world on this list because the horror has a specific address. But the next world also has a known threat, a known vector, and a known way to protect yourself, but this one comes with a drug epidemic. The Smile Tapes is an independent analog horror series created by Poderico, I think that's how you pronounce his name. It's presented as a collection of 1990s emergency broadcasts, news reports, and PSAs documenting a terrifying epidemic sweeping across the United States. The crisis starts with a black market street drug called Smile. It's made from the spores of an unknown alien-like fungus. People who ingest it are infected by a parasitic microbe that takes over their bodies completely. And the symptom that makes this series so deeply unsettling is that the victims develop a frozen, grotesque grin that doesn't go away. And they don't look sick, they look like something hollowed them out and left a smile behind as a placeholder. Emergency broadcasts are going out, quarantine zones are being established, and the infection is spreading through communities faster than the institutions can contain it. So the question is, could you actually survive in this world? Believe it or not, I'm gonna give this one a 72% chance of you surviving, and this one will surprise people because the Smile Tapes is viscerally disturbing. But here's the thing, it's survivable because the infection spreads through one vector, a specific black market street drug. That is a controllable transmission pathway compared to everything else on this list. The Smile Tapes requires a deliberate act of ingestion. You have agency over your survival in a way that most analog horror worlds categorically deny you. Basically, the rule is simple and absolute. Do not take the smile. And on top of that, the infrastructure is working. Emergency broadcasts, news reports, PSAs, quarantine patrols. The institutions are aware, communicating, and actively trying to contain the spread. You're not navigating this alone and uninformed. So like I said before, 72% survival, the vector is avoidable, institutions are functional, the information is public, and the people who die in this world will most likely die because they didn't believe it was real until it was already too late. So that's two worlds, two passes where the average person, hey, They got a shot. This next one, the margin will get even tighter. Spoiler alert, because this world has been running since 1931, and some of what's living in it has had nearly a century to get better at killing you. Vita Carnis, Latin for living meat, is an analog horror series created by Canadian Darian Killoy. It is set in an alternate history starting in 1931, where Earth is overrun by bizarre, skinless, fleshy, biological entities that challenges humanity's position at the top of the food chain. The ecosystem of these creatures branches from a common source. The crawl is the foundational organism, which is a vast network of fleshy, vine-like tendrils that spreads like fungus. From it comes the trimming, a mostly harmless lump of meat that can communicate through a hive mind. The meat snake, which is a highly durable creature and capable of regenerating by splitting itself in half. The mimic, humanoid, clawed, and specifically interested in hunting human flesh. The harvester, which dissolves its prey with acid. The host of influence, which emits hazardous spores that mentally override your decision making and leads you directly into the creature's mouth. And the monolith, which is a massive, damn near invulnerable, and essentially unkillable creature. And at the center of it is the singularity, the only entity with true paranormal abilities and the source of the entire ecosystem. And then there's the Notorious cult, which is a fanatical human organization that doesn't fight the creatures. They worship them and they feed people to the singularity. And they've been doing this for decades. So the question is, could you actually survive in this world? I'm going to give this one a conditional pass at 61% survival rating, and here's why. Vita Carnis doesn't present a world that's in collapse. It presents a world that's reorganized around a threat. Most of the creatures are manageable. The crawl is environmental, so it's avoidable if you know where it grows. Trimmings are mostly harmless and people have them as pets. Meat snakes are also harmless, just don't touch them while they're eating or they will get violent. However, mimics actively hunt humans, and the more humans they eat, the more they start to take on human-like features. They can even dress in clothes and portray themselves as humans. They can also evolve into an elder mimic. However, the chances of you running into one are extremely low. They can also hide in your furniture and will stalk you for days, so just make sure you be aware of your surroundings. For harvester, be careful in the woods or forest areas. There should be signs that warn you that a harvester is nearby. For the host of influence, that is a silent killer because they emit spores that override your decision-making ability before you even know that they're in the air. So just wear a mask. That is not optional in this world. The cult adds an extra layer of paranoia on top of all these other creatures. However, they operate more in secrecy. They want you guys alive because they want to continue sacrificing you to these creatures. So be very careful with the information that they present to you because the cult is everywhere. The first three worlds had something in common. You can see the threat coming. You can make a decision. The next world removes that option entirely because in this world, the decision was never yours to make. The Backrooms is an analog horror web series created by Kane Parsons based on the Backrooms creepypasta. It's presented as found footage centered around a fictional organization called the Asnick Research Institute, which is a group of scientists who discover and attempt to study an extra-dimensional space consisting of large indoor complexes. The Backrooms themselves are an impossibly large extra-dimensional complex of empty rooms. Endless yellow identical walls, fluorescent lighting that never turns off, no windows, no exit. The way you enter into the Backrooms is through no clipping, which is basically you face through reality, not by doing anything specific, but by simply existing in the wrong place at the wrong moment. This could be walking through your office, a parking garage, a school hallway. Reality has a seam and you can fall right through it without warning, without any preparation. Could you actually survive in this world? And this is a huge fail, 28% chance survival rate. And it's the most frustrating kind of fail on this list because survival inside the Backrooms is theoretically possible. The found footage installments follow civilians who enter the complex and they navigate it, and we've seen people survive long enough to document their experiences. So this is not a world where contact equals instant death. The problem is that you're not prepared for what's inside, not just with the monsters but with how big and endless the Backrooms feels. And these conditions produce psychological deterioration faster than most physical threats in this world would. People don't just get lost in the Backrooms, they unravel in them. So like I said, 28% survival, competent, psychologically resilient, resourceful individuals have a genuine shot. However, the average person dropped inside without any warning or preparation does not. The Backrooms doesn't just choose you, it takes you. This next world is different. The next world chooses you very specifically, and once it does, it is patient in a way that should terrify you, because it has been watching you longer than you know. And the worst part, you might have already attracted its attention without even realizing it. Marble Hornets is a seminal found footage horror web series that ran from 2009 to 2014, and is the most famous adaptation of the Slender Man mythos, though the series never calls it that. The story follows a film student named Jay Merrick who uncovers the raw, abandoned footage of his friend Alice Crail's student film. Jay begins uploading the tapes to YouTube and notices something wrong: audio-visual distortion, glitches, and appearance of a tall, faceless figure in the background of the footage, known as the operator. As Jay digs deeper into the mystery and searches for his missing friends, the lines between the footage and his own life begin to blur. The operator induces amnesia. It induces madness. It doesn't just stalk, it targets, it edits them. Victims lose hours, days, and sometimes weeks of memories. They wake up in different locations with no recollection of how they got there. And prolonged exposure doesn't just frighten you, it fundamentally alters your psychology. Paranoia, dissociation, violent behavior, complete breakdowns from reality. So the question is, could you survive in this world? Nope, fail, 50% survival rate. Every other threat on this list has logic to its targeting. The operator selection criteria are never fully explained, which means there's no behavioral change you can make to guarantee you're safe. You cannot unattract something whose mechanism of attraction is unknown. And here's what makes the operator so scary. It edits you. You cannot build a survival strategy around an enemy that periodically wipes your memory of its existence. Every plan you make, every precaution you take, every piece of knowledge you accumulate, all of it is vulnerable to a single encounter of the operator, which can leave you disoriented and starting over without knowing that you're starting over. And the madness is progressive and irreversible past a certain threshold. There is one survival rule this world teaches you, which is basically stop looking. Every character who dies or deteriorates in Marble Hornets does so because they kept pulling the thread, and the operator's reach expands in direct proportion to how deeply its targets pursue the mystery. The moment you find the first tape, the first glitch, the first gap in your memory, the survival move is to walk away, leave the state, and never look at the footage again. However, almost no one does that, because the horror is designed to make you need to know what happens next. 1% survival rate, geographical relocation, and deliberate ignorance offer a very narrow window of survival. The moment curiosity takes over, and it will because we're human, the operator begins making its move and you are more and more close to your... The operator is patient. It waits for your curiosity to do the work for it. The next world has already infiltrated every institution you trust, every system designed to protect you, and every person you might turn to for help. And by the time you realize what's happening, it has already infiltrated your life by using someone who looks exactly like you. The Mandela Catalogue is an analog horror series set primarily in the 1990s and late 2000s, taking place in the fictional city of Mandela County, Wisconsin. The county is terrorized by shape-shifting creatures called the Alternates. Alternates are humanoid entities nearly immortal and led by a false depiction of the Archangel Gabriel, whose entire purpose is to eradicate humanity through psychological torture. They copy specific people, they find the person whose form they've taken, and then they use psychological warfare to convince that person to take their own life. The method is called metaphysical awareness disorder, also known as MAD. The alternate doesn't need to physically attack you. It just needs to talk to you, the right one, the right subject matter, and your own mind becomes a weapon that is used against you. They can manipulate televisions, computers, GPS systems, they can corrupt official broadcasts, and they are extremely difficult, if not impossible, to kill. PSAs exist. The think principle was developed and distributed. People in the Mandela County know alternates are real, but knowing they exist and surviving an encounter with one are two different things. So, the main question I've been asking, could you survive in this world? This is worse than the last one, 12%. And here's why. The core issue isn't just one alternate. It's that you cannot trust anyone. Your neighbor, your spouse, your coworker, any of them could be a copy. Any of them could be an alternate. There's no reliable detection method shown to consistently expose them before it's too late. Social isolation becomes your only defense, and that is unsustainable in the long term. And the information environment is compromised. TVs, computers, GPS systems, all potential vectors. The corrupted PSA tape reveals that even official emergency broadcasts cannot be trusted. So calling 911 may or may not get you any help. There is a slim case for survival. Firearms work as a last resort. Community awareness in Mandela County is relatively high. People know alternates exist, which removes the disbelief problem that kills most horror victims. Rural or isolated living could reduce exposure frequency. But here's the bottom line. The Mandela Catalogue doesn't kill you with monsters in the dark. It kills you by making you distrust reality itself. The moment an alternate makes contact and begins the psychological process, your survival odds drop dramatically because the battlefield is in your own mind. And most people are completely unprepared for that kind of warfare. It's 12% survival chance. The world is survivable in theory. However, you're not the right person for it. All right. We are in the bottom four now, 12%, 15%, 28%. Those numbers felt low, but they still had a number attached to them. They still had a path, no matter how narrow that a specific kind of person could walk. The next four worlds don't really offer you a path. They offer you a timeline. And the question stops being, can you survive? And instead it becomes, how long do you have until you're dead? The Greylock Tapes is an analog horror series created by Rob Gavigan. Set in the 1980s and 90s, it follows a military corporate project that attempted to harness the occult to create something called the Thought Form Manifester, a machine capable of bringing people's thoughts and fears to life. The story centers on the strange paranormal events surrounding Mount Greylock and the government's conspiracy surrounding them. A shadow corporation and the military experiment with a machine that reaches into the human subconscious and builds physical entities of what it finds there. These materialized thoughts, known as thought forms or tulpas, don't manifest cleanly. They manifest corruption. They're distorted, violent, cannibalistic versions of whatever psychological material the machine pulled from. So the question is, could you survive in this world? This is a massive fail at only 11% chance of survival. The Greylock Tapes doesn't end the world. It ends you from the inside out. And that distinction makes it one of the most psychologically precise death sentences on this list. It just reaches into your subconscious, your deepest fears, and your deepest thoughts and builds a physical entity out of them. You are not the target, you are the source material. The harder you try to mentally suppress your fears, the more psychic energy you pour into the manifestation process. There is no safe input. Even theoretically neutral thoughts are processed through a corrupting mechanism and emerge as something monstrous. Geographic distance from Mount Greylock buys time, but the psychological resilience slows the process. It never stops it. 11% survival. The machine already has everything it needs because it's been inside you the entire time. The Greylock Tapes uses your own mind against you, and that is intimate and that is personal. The next world doesn't care about you personally at all. It doesn't care about your fears, your psychology, or your survival instincts. It operates at a scale where you are not even in consideration. And the most disturbing part, the threat was never hiding. It was built into the foundations of the very country that you grew up in. Monument Mythos is an analog horror series set in a paranormal alternate history of America. The episodes use analog horror found footage and mockumentary formats to depict a fictional US presidencies and a sprawling conspiracy built around one terrifying truth. The national monuments of America are not what they appear to be. Beneath the Lincoln Memorial, beneath Mount Rushmore, beneath the landmarks and the symbols of national identity, there are Lovecraftian entities known as true forces of mass destruction, FMDs. They were always there, embedded inside the monuments long before anyone alive was born. And the government knows. Multiple administrations have known, and deliberate policy decisions across all of them have been concealment. The series most notably unfolds in the Deanverse, a timeline where actor James Dean won the 1968 presidential election. As the story expands, it branches into a multiverse of parallel realities. And at the center of all of it is the Great Division, a multiversal collapse event that threatens to fracture and destroy realities entirely. So the question is, could you survive in this world? Fail 9%, but it's uniquely intellectual kind of failure. You don't die screaming in the woods. You die because the reality you were standing on was never as solid as you thought. And by the time you understand that, the Great Division has already started. Every other analog horror world has a threat that invaded or arrived. Monument Mythos is different and more disturbing. The TFMDs were always there. You cannot avoid the threat by avoiding the woods, turning off the TV, or moving to a city. The threat is the city. It is the country. It is the shared cultural foundation everyone is standing on simultaneously. And the government has been managing, concealing, and in some cases building around these entities for centuries. The people with the most power to protect you chose concealment over protection. The information you would need to make informed survival decisions was taken away from you across multiple administrations. Here, the suppression of information is a deliberate human policy decision made by your own government. That hits way too close to home, by the way. And then there's the Great Division, a multiversal collapse event. You are not fighting a creature, a disease, or even a cosmic entity with a specific agenda. You are caught inside the structural failure of reality itself. You're cooked. Individual preparation, community building, geographic relocation, none of that matters when the problem is that existence itself is fracturing. 9% survival. Short-term survival is documented within the lore. Long-term survival requires either profound ignorance of the truth or the psychological fortitude to function while knowing the foundations of reality are actively collapsing. Almost no one has either. Monument Mythos kills you with knowledge. The Great Division kills you with scale. The next world doesn't kill you with either one of those things. It kills you with indifference? It is a civilizational extinction event dressed up in VHS static and camping infomercials. Gemini Home Entertainment is an analog horror series created by Remy Abode that mimics a vintage VHS distribution company. Using the retro aesthetic of the 1980s and 1990s educational videos, nature documentaries, astronomy guides that documents a cosmic horror apocalypse unfolding in slow motion. The threat at the center of the series is called the Iris, which is a sentient eye-shaped planet. It is a malevolent cosmic entity that corrupts human technology and devours other planets. It has already consumed Neptune and is in the process of converting Earth into a living organism. To prepare Earth for consumption, the Iris sends creatures to the surface, which are wood crawlers, mimicry-capable monsters that stalk the woods, imitate human voices to lure in victims, and hollow out human bodies to wear as puppets. And deep root disease, a biological plague that spreads through roots and vines, gradually transforming the planet's entire ecosystem into the living flesh image of the Iris. The broadcasts start as innocent educational content. However, they end as desperate, fragmented distress signals. That arc is not a storytelling choice. It is a record of what happened to human civilization's ability to communicate, organize, and respond. So the question is, could you survive in this world? Hell no, you can't survive in this world. Are you kidding me? You're fucked. The Iris isn't sending creatures to kill humanity. It's terraforming Earth into a living organism. The ground beneath your feet, the trees around you, the ecosystem you depend on for food, water, and shelter is all being biologically rewritten. You cannot outlast a threat that is literally becoming the environment you need to survive. And the wood crawlers remove the one thing that could save you: other people. The Iris consumed Neptune. You can't fight this thing. It's not a disease that you can cure or evasion that you can repel. It is a cosmic process. Humanity's entire military, scientific, and institutional capacity is irrelevant against this thing because it operates on a planetary scale. 6% survival rate. Short-term survival may be possible. In the long term, you're dead. The last world on this list is different. The last world on this list doesn't need something after you. It doesn't terraform the ground beneath you. It doesn't hide inside the monuments you grew up in. It doesn't even try to eat you. It hijacks the most ordinary moments of your life. The weather report you have watched before bed. The GPS you follow without thinking. The sky you've been looking at your entire life without once considering what might be looking back. And by the time you understand what this thing is, it has already been inside your head for longer than you know. Local 58 is an analog horror series that is presented as a collection of found footage and VHS archival clips from a fictional public access television station called WCL-TV, based in Mason County. Spanning several decades from the late 1930s to the digital age, the station's standard broadcast schedule is repeatedly hijacked by something that uses signal as a weapon. Weather alerts become psychological threats. Late night programming becomes a government contingency plan for mass suicide. A GPS navigation system slowly reroutes a driver off public highways and into a dense forest towards something predatory. Children's programming becomes something that should not be watched by anyone. God. And at the center of it all, the moon. Multiple broadcasts warn viewers not to look at the sky, not to look at the moon. The entity haunting Local 58 has a malevolent living presence connected to the night sky and is not hunting individuals. It is exerting influence over the entire population at once. The station fought the analog to digital transition. It didn't disappear when the medium changed. It migrated, it adapted, and it is persistent in a way that suggests it has been doing this for a very long time. So the question is, could you survive in this world? And honestly, do we even have to answer this? Hell no, you ain't nigga, are you serious? You're not surviving in this world. And unlike the Mandela Catalogue, where survival is unlikely, in Local 58, survival may not be even a category that applies. The Mandela Catalogue sends creature out to individuals. Local 58's threat is aimed at everyone simultaneously. The moon is not hunting you specifically, it is exerting influence over the entire population at once. You cannot negotiate with it, hide from it, or even outlast it. It is a planetary level horror wearing the skin of a natural object you've looked at your entire life. Contingency is perhaps the most disturbing element of the entire series. The official emergency broadcast system, the one you are conditioned to obey in times of crisis, is used to instruct mass suicide framed as a patriotic last resort. The institution designed to save you becomes the crisis itself, and there's no authority left to trust. And the sky itself is the enemy. Simply going outside at night is potentially lethal. The moon is always there. Clouds move. You will eventually look up, whether through curiosity, accident, or the slow psychological erosion of being told not to do something for too long. Theoretical survival exists only for someone who's never consumes media, never drives, and never looks at the night sky. And we all know that's not possible. The moon was there before you were born, it will be there after, and at some point you will look up. 4% of survival, you're cooked. So that's 10 worlds, 10 verdicts, 3 passes, 7 fails, and the gap between the top and the bottom of this list is the difference between a haunting that has a specific address and a cosmic process that doesn't know your name and doesn't need to. Here's what I keep coming back to when I think about all these worlds together. The ones you survive are the ones where the horror has rules, a location, a target, a vector you can avoid. The ones you don't survive are the ones where the horror has already been inside the systems you trust. The broadcast, the monuments, the machine that reads your mind, the moon you've been looking at your entire life. The worlds that kill you aren't the ones with the most violent creatures. They're the ones where the version of reality you thought you were living in was the horror story all along. Which world scared you the most? And more importantly, which one do you think you'd actually survive? Please comment below, subscribe and like, and I'll see you guys next time.